And good evening, everybody. Once again, welcome to the Tim Miles Love Fest, known as the Hoops HD Bracket Rundown. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood.
Tim
With
Miles.
us, celebrating, probably drunk off of that win, David Griggs. First of all, David, how you doing?
Oh, I'm fantastic. I tried to tell you, you wouldn't listen. He will crush the non-believers. I mean, this is the kind of win that puts them. Well, we're about to unveil the bracket.
Yes, that puts them squarely in my top 36 teams that did not make the field. Also joining us is John Stalika. John, how are you?
I'm scared because who knows how many more games Nebraska is going to be able to roll off now after their inspired effort earlier tonight.
Yeah, big win, and we're going to get to that as we go through the teams here and discuss just how good or maybe how not so good Michigan State is. As you may recall, I told everybody they were a 9 seed heading into the season, and they're heading closer to that than a 1 seed right now, in my opinion. But let's get right into it. What we're going to do is I'm going to pull up the screen here, show you what we're going to be doing tonight. If it will work, give us half a second. But coming up on the screen here in just a second now.
It's black. It's perfect.
It's black. It's perfect. And now I'm back.
Yeah, now you're back.
All right. We had a minor technical difficulties. We're going to give us half a second. We're going to try it again. But coming up in half a second here, you will see the bracket on the screen. This is going to be a 1 through 68 seed list, along with a little room for some top teams out. David, is it there?
It is there.
Okay, wonderful.
This isn't a bracket. It's a seed list.
It's a seed list. Yeah, thank you for correcting me. This is not a bracket, but this is a seed list. What we're going to be doing here is David and John are going to be telling me who each team they feel in each of these lines of the seed list needs to be all the way through the end of the at-large teams, which will be probably somewhere in the 12 seed range, normally is at least. And I will be the arbiter making the final decision after they argue it out, and whoever persuades me the most will win. We'll get all of our at-large teams built into the seed list here, as well as discuss some of the top teams that did not make the seed list. That will be most of it for tonight. We're actually going to be recording our Under the Radar podcast coming up a little bit later tonight as well. And David, we're doing things a little differently there tonight.
Yeah, switching it up. It has to do with the availability or lack thereof of our staff. So we are doing both of them tonight. And I guess we should have talked about this, but I don't know exactly how we're going to post this. If we're going to make 2 different ones or one post with both, I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, you're probably going to see.
It might be right down there. It might be right down there as I speak.
Yeah, right below. If you look down, you're going to see the Under the Radar podcast, and below that, you will see the final bracket actually of the seed list that we're going to build here on 1 through the first seeds through 12 seeds. On the Under the Radar, we're going to build the 13 through the 16 line as well. So we will build the entire thing between 2 different podcasts. Have a bracket. It's going to be an exciting night.
Oh, absolutely.
This bracket does not get lost in the blizzard that's going to be hitting Chad's neighborhood in a few days.
Yeah, we've got some snow coming, but let's and may have some effect on some schedules. We'll see. We'll have to pay attention to some of the games upcoming this weekend. But let's get right into it. Number 1 overall team. Let's go through the top 4 seeds in order here. Actually, number 1 overall team. I don't think there should be any dispute here. But David, let me start with you. Who's number 1 overall?
I still have Oklahoma.
John?
I would also go Boomer Sooner in number 1.
Good, because if either of you tried to not say that, I was gonna mute you for the rest of the podcast. Right. Oklahoma number 1 overall. Despite the loss this week, I think that their profile is just that much better than anybody else's still.
Yeah, it is. And a couple things to clarify, Chad. We're not guessing the committee, are we? On this show.
Yeah, no, we are not. What we are I keep saying bracket. This seed list is what the 2, or I guess the 2 of you plus me as arbiter feel that these teams should be if we were the committee, not what we think the actual committee will do. Right. Our colleague John Titel does brackets based on what he feels the committee will actually do.
Yeah. So Oklahoma number 1, and again, like to a point that was made in the notes, winning at the game that they lost at Iowa State is not going to hurt them at all. You can lose a game like that and still be a 1 seed. I think their body of work is the best as far as the other 3 go.
And you also now Oklahoma does have 2 losses, but there's only 1 team left in the nation with only 1 loss that's postseason eligible, and that's South Carolina. SMU, of course, undefeated. And David, where do you have SMU in this field?
I have them just out.
Okay, just now. But let's go, John. Who's number 2 overall?
Number 2, I would have, pending their outcome tonight, the Villanova Wildcats.
David, agree or disagree?
Disagree, but not strongly.
Okay.
I have Nova at number 3, and this has probably changed a little bit since I did it last. I still have Iowa all the way up at number 2, and it's a body of work thing. It's 2 massive road wins, one at Purdue, one at Michigan State. Although how massive is that? And then the other home win against Michigan State. You mentioned not penalizing Oklahoma for the loss at Iowa State. I don't think you can penalize Iowa either. I realize that Iowa has losses to Dayton and one other one, but the thing is, these 1-seed profiles, and there's still a long way to go. They may end up looking that way. Typically, your 1-seeds don't lose at home, and the only games they lose are to protected seeds on the road, and they even beat multiple protected seeds on the road. But we don't really have any teams that fit that description, so I still have Iowa all the way up here on the 1 line.
This would probably be where I would argue that Villanova would be a worthy number 2 overall, because if you look at what they've done in the Big East, they've smacked Xavier. They've also gotten a nice win at home over Seton Hall, and also have a win over St. Joe's and Hawk Hill that's starting to look better and better. Their quality of their losses, although I know this is a little vague, against Oklahoma and Virginia, are still better than what Iowa has so far.
Yeah.
I really have to agree with John here. Another point that I make when looking at Iowa's profile here, top 50 wins away from home. They both have 3 of them, but one of Iowa's wins was against Wichita State without Van Vliet, so it doesn't carry as much weight for me either there, that Wichita State win. So I kind of look at it as 2 wins away from home against the top 50 for Iowa, 3 for Villanova, 1 more loss for Iowa overall. That all tells me that Villanova should be number 2 overall.
Well, I mean, I can't make you guys be correct, so if you want to be wrong, go ahead.
But, John, would you have Iowa 3 overall?
I would have Iowa number 4 overall, and I would have North Carolina number 3 overall.
Okay. David, do you want to address North Carolina? Where would you have them?
Close. Again, I have them number 5 overall, so we're not talking far from the 1 line. This is a hard argument to make after what happened yesterday, losing at home to a non-tournament team and losing rather convincingly. I still think the overall, and I hate this cliche, I need to come up, the overall body of work of Xavier is still really good. I still think their paper is better than North Carolina. Xavier lost at Villanova, and they lost at home to Georgetown. North Carolina lost at Northern Iowa and, at Texas. The Texas loss isn't that bad, especially after what happened now. But I still have Xavier just ahead of them, but again, it's close.
All right. So, David, you actually go Iowa, Xavier, North Carolina in that order. John, you're going North Carolina, Iowa, Xavier 5th?
I would actually have Kansas 5th and Xavier 6th.
Okay. John, you're the Xavier guy, and I'm looking at Xavier's profile right now. They have a road win. They have 5 top 50 wins. 4 of them are away from home. They have 4 more top 100 wins, 2 of which are away from home. And if you look at their wins in the 51 to 100 range, at Wake, at Marquette, home against Cincinnati, these are teams that are going to be near the bubble line, or at least at some points recently have been near the bubble line. It's not like when you go over to North Carolina and their top 50 wins are, their wins in the 51 to 100 range are against a lot more suspect teams, was I guess the way I put it, just getting them up here. The 51 to 100 wins for North Carolina are against teams like NC State, Georgia Tech, Kansas State, teams that are a lot further down than the teams that Xavier has beaten. On top of that, North Carolina only has 3 top 50 wins right now, only one of them on the road at Florida State, and one of the home wins is Davidson.
I think Xavier has the better paper, but I don't go completely on the paper alone when looking at some of the teams.
But I think you're taking one loss and over penalizing them for it. despite how bad they looked against Georgetown, and a Georgetown team that, heading into the season, I would have expected them to have a shot to win that game.
Well, yes, Georgetown was a team that was expected to finish second in the Big Ten, but until last night, they've had some close games against top 10 teams, but they finally put it all together.
And I would not be surprised if Georgetown starts running off some wins and makes the field by the end of the day.
But we're not talking about Georgetown on this line.
Yeah.
That's the only problem.
What I'm kind of getting here, too, is I'm kind of leaning towards agreeing with David that it should be Iowa-Xavier 3-4.
You won't hear me complaining about it. That's
Yeah. I do have North Carolina right behind them, and I think John and I evaluated these teams exactly the same way. I like Xavier's paper a lot more. I kind of like North Carolina's team, but I like Xavier's team too, and they had one bad game. I mean, Kansas went out and also didn't have the best of nights last night either, but you have to look at all the games, and I think when you look at all the games, Xavier's just look better more often.
I think Kansas's loss last night was worse than Xavier's loss last night.
Yeah, Kansas was not exactly competitive in the second half of that one. There were times when Xavier looked like they were going to get close, and even, broke the fire alarm, got the press, but weren't able to capitalize on the late Georgetown turnovers.
Well, we've gone to put Iowa-Xavier on the 1 line. North Carolina starting the 2 line. I know John likes Kansas, so they would be his next team. But, David, is Kansas your next team?
They are.
Okay, then we've got a consensus there. And, John, let me head back to you. Who would fill out your 2 line here?
Yeah, this is where we would start to diverge a little bit. This is where I'm going to go with Maryland and Texas A&M on the 2 line.
Texas A&M and Maryland. Okay, David, where are you looking at for the 2 line here?
Well, again, I realized what happened earlier tonight, but it is the entire body of work. It was not good to lose at home to an unprotected seed and still be this high, but I still have Iowa State and West Virginia. It's 7 and 8, and his teams. I have them. I don't even have them on my next line, Maryland or A&M.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about Iowa State and West Virginia first. And let me start, John, with you responding to this Iowa State-West Virginia argument here for the 2 line. What don't you like about these teams, or do you have them very close to this range?
I would have had West Virginia on my 2 line originally going into tonight's game. Like some of the other teams, I wasn't very enthused with the Mountaineers' non-conference schedule. I liked how they've looked lately, but that's still a game that a protected seed ought to be able to win at home, much like Xavier. Maybe I'm over-penalizing them a little bit in that regard. But I do like how well Iowa State has played after their slip-up at home against Baylor. So I would see both teams on my 3 line for the time being.
Okay, so you're not totally objectionable to Iowa State or West Virginia, but David, I think you are more objectionable to A&M and Maryland. And why don't I'll give you a chance to voice your objection.
Yeah, I mean, I like A&M. I had them as a protected seed. I thought I had them higher than what most would have. All the way up on the 2 line, I'm just not seeing it at all. Maryland, again, it's just their paper's weak, and then they go out and their team, they don't even look that good. I mean, there are teams with weak paper that, at least like North Carolina, they go out there and they look like they're a protected seeded team. Maryland, again, maybe I just catch them on bad nights, but every night I watch them, they're sweating out a non-tournament team, and last night they sweat out Northwestern at home. I just don't see it on paper. I just don't see it on the court. I don't see what the voters are looking at when they vote Maryland 3rd and 5th and whatever it is they're ranked.
Maryland and Indiana are both going to be similar in that their schedules are more backloaded. So we'll see in February how well they do.
Well, John, you're not going to win the Maryland argument with me. I think we both have kind of agreed that Iowa State is close here, and I will put them in as the 3rd 2 seed. I think the debate here is going to be A&M versus West Virginia. And Dave, when I look at this A&M profile, only 2 losses. A neutral court loss to a Syracuse team who is starting to look a lot better. A road loss at Arizona State. Other than that, they've won every single game that they've played, including beating the Texas team that suddenly has a lot of life to it after tonight's win at West Virginia. They don't have the top 50 road win, which I know you like to see.
Yes, they don't have that.
But they
And
only
that's,
played one top 50 road game, and can you penalize them for playing in the SEC?
well, yeah. When you don't
They're
do it out of
dominating
conference,
everybody. They beat LSU 71-57. Georgia 79-45 on the road. I mean 92-69 over Arkansas. They are dominating teams right now. It's not even close. And I think this A&M team is playing, I'd argue, as good as anybody in the country. Maybe even everybody in the country, because of Oklahoma just coming off of a loss.
Don't forget that they also beat Baylor back in December.
It did beat Baylor at home. They beat Florida at home, correct?
yeah, they beat them at home.
80-61. Another dominating home win.
Well, I mean, I think they're a halfway decent team. I just don't have them up there this time.
And this team. I don't know if this team is going to lose an SEC play. Quite honestly, they've got Kentucky at home. They're only meeting this year. This team could be in the top. This team could be contending for a 1 seed by the end of the day if they keep playing the way they're playing right now. That's what I'm going to throw out there.
I don't think it's going to be there for a 1 seed. I mean, I could see them getting as high as the 3 line, but they pretty much have to come close to winning out to do it.
Well, given that West Virginia lost tonight at home to Texas, and there's only 3 teams that we're debating right here, David, Texas A&M's a 2 seed in this bracket.
Well, they're a 4 seed.
But let's go on to the 3 line here. David, I know you like West Virginia. Who'd your other 3 teams be here on the 3 line?
This is where I would whip out Michigan State, and I still have Providence up here. Providence has some warts. They're really inconsistent, but overall, I still like their paper, and I still like their team. And my next team down would be Miami, the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes, Miami, Florida, not to be confused with the Red Hawks.
All right. John, I know you'd like Maryland at the top of this line. Who would your other 3 teams here be?
Besides Maryland, this is where I add West Virginia, Providence, and I'm also going to go with Baylor right here.
Okay, well, you both have agreed on West Virginia and Providence, so that will start things off. John, why don't you like Michigan State here?
Well, for one thing, they have a 3-game losing streak, and 2 of those teams are against teams that are nowhere close to the NCAA tournament field at the moment.
David, do you want to respond to make the case for Michigan State?
Nebraska's in. They're on my. They're in my field. I assume the committee's going to take them.
Do you want to make David? What don't you like about Baylor, or do you think that they're close?
I like Baylor, but I don't like them this much. Again, I just think that they went to the bakery a little too much. They do have 2 really good wins on their profile. I could make a case to put them up here if I really had to, if it were debate class, but I just had them a little lower. I don't like them as much as Michigan State's entire body of work. Honestly, I know Virginia has struggled in true road games, but they do have some really good wins away from home. I actually have Maryland ahead of Baylor, believe it or not. So I have several other teams a little bit higher than Baylor based. Most of their momentum was built up beating Cupcakes at home. And I know that they have the 2 good wins, but that still isn't enough to be this high, I don't think.
Well, besides Texas, Baylor's the only other team that has a quality road win in the Big 12, so I do have to give them some points in that regard, whether they played Cupcakes or whether they played meat and potatoes.
I do want to make a point here that we're recording this. We start a little after 9 p.m. on January 20th here, Wednesday night. Just want to make that quick point here because as we record this, Baylor is actually in a close home game against Kansas State. But we're not going to be doing any contingency brackets. So just wanted to make that quick point. But John, let me turn back to you about this Miami team. What about them as the last 3 seed? As I have been persuaded that Michigan State belongs here.
I personally would have had Miami a little bit lower on the 4 line, but I can certainly understand the case for the Hurricanes with wins away from home against Utah and Butler down in Puerto Rico back in November. But they also have some decent wins against Florida, Syracuse, Florida State. I suppose we could do do Princeton when we're talking about our under the radar tonight.
Yeah.
Well, I've been convinced on all three teams that you have all mentioned, and I'm going to give Miami the last three seed spot over both Baylor and Maryland. I am going to put them at the top of the 4 line. So I'm going to turn to David now for your next 2 4 seeds.
Okay.
And I know you may not agree with Maryland, but
Well,
John had them way up at the 2 line. I think
you're messing this whole thing up. I mean, is Providence in yet?
Yes.
So Providence and I can't see this is hard with.
Sorry, let me read them off again. The 3 seed line is West Virginia, Providence, Michigan State, and Miami. So we're going to the 4 line. Baylor and Maryland will take the first 2 spots, and who else is on your 4 line?
My next 2 are Virginia and Purdue, and a team. Oh, Baylor, I have them right behind them. So yeah, Virginia and Purdue are my next 2.
John, would you agree with Virginia and Purdue?
I would agree with Virginia and Purdue, but I would actually have Southern Cal ahead of those 2 teams.
Oh, David, what about Southern Cal?
I have them in this. I have them in the ballpark. I have them right behind Arizona. I know they beat Arizona, but they beat Arizona in triple overtime at home. And I think overall, especially with what they've done away from home, Arizona's just done a little bit more.
So you actually like Arizona's profile, who we haven't even mentioned yet, better than Southern Cal's?
Yeah, I have them right next to each other.
Okay. And both of them below Virginia and Purdue.
Yeah, I mean, the next 4, Virginia, Purdue, Arizona, Southern Cal.
Okay, so they would be your next 2 teams heading into the 5 line.
What I was going to say, David, is if St. Mary's beats Gonzaga tomorrow and potentially knocks the Zags out of my field, Arizona is not going to have any other wins against a team that's safely in right now.
Yeah. And I got to agree with you. I have a major problem with Arizona anywhere close to this seed line. I think that Arizona's profile has one top 50 win. It was at Arizona State, who's not going to be in this field. Top 100 wins, a home win over Washington, who's going to be we're going to be debating near the bubble. 2 wins over Boise State, who may not be in if they're in, they're in as the auto bid, and the Gonzaga win.
Yeah, well, I mean,
there's no meat there to Arizona's profile. USC has the meat on their profile at least.
Well, USC, I mean, again, they won at Arizona State. They won at Gonzaga. I realize these aren't teams that are solidly in the field, but they're still snake pits. It's not easy to go there and win. And, Southern Cal, it was a 4 overtime game. It wasn't like, that game's a neutral site or a home game for Arizona.
It's still a loss.
Yeah, but you have to look at the location of the game. I mean, I'm not discrediting South Carolina or Southern Cal for winning it. I'm just not penalizing Arizona for losing.
But we have, with USC, wins over Monmouth, who will be in this field, Wichita State, who will be in this field, albeit it was a shorthanded Wichita State team.
That's it, yeah.
Arizona, who will be in this field. UCLA, who's going to be right here on the bubble.
And that was at UCLA, which
that was a good win. I like USC. I have them next.
Where I'm going with this, as far as finishing out the 4 line, we're going to go with USC, followed by I'm sorry, we're going to go with Virginia, followed by USC. Finish out the 4 line, and then Purdue will start out the 5 line because you've both said you like them already. We do need the rest of the 5 line. John, let me turn to you for your next 3 teams.
Oh, I hate my 5 line.
Okay, let me make one little correction because this is where I would have originally had Michigan State, believe it or not. But this is where I would add Arizona, Dayton, and Louisville.
Arizona, Dayton, and a Louisville team that's beating nobody. Okay, David, who would be the rest of your 5 line behind Purdue?
Louisville is so far from this line, and I know that they're up right now on Florida State. I have Arizona. I'm not a fan of. I know they're weak overall, but I still have Kentucky up here, and I still have Butler up here. Butler does have the win against Purdue. The one thing that's categorically bad about Butler is that they're currently 2-4 in conference. But there just isn't anything really bad on Butler's profile, and there's enough good to where it's really starting to smell bad once you get below this line. At least I thought it was.
David,
here's what I don't like about Butler right now. Their only wins in the Big East are at DePaul and at home against St. John's. they've lost all 4 of their games against the top tier, which include Villanova, Xavier, and now a pair of games against Providence.
Yeah, but
Start racking up some decent wins in a hurry here.
they do need to start winning, but like again, Villanova, Xavier, and Providence is who they've lost to. They haven't played Marquette. They haven't played Seton Hall. They haven't played a lot of teams that Villanova, Xavier, and Providence have played.
Butler has not lost a game outside the RPI top 25. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And that neutral court win over Purdue is a very solid win.
Yeah. But
the
John
win at
is
Cincinnati,
right.
the Temple win, I do like this Butler profile. I'll agree with David on that.
John is right about their conference record. I mean, they're 2 games below 500. If they finish 2 games below 500, they're probably nowhere near this range.
But I think it's a matter of this fact that their schedule was kind of front-loaded in conference. But David, what about Dayton? Yes, they lost the game to LaSalle, but if you look at the rest of their profile, whether or not they've looked good on the court winning the games, they have won them, and they sit here with 9 top 100 wins, including the Iowa win and the Monmouth win.
I do not have them in the top 20. I do not have Dayton. I have the number 21.
Okay.
I have them very close. The thing with Dayton, and there are teams, and again, it's typical of this time of year, and it's typical all season long, really, until about mid-February, where I don't think their paper matches their ability. Dayton is one of the teams that I think their paper is actually better than their team, and I don't mean that as a slight at Dayton at all. If anything, it's a compliment. They've been able to play over themselves a little bit. They do have the gross loss at LaSalle. North Carolina, a case where I don't think their paper is as good as their team. I like Dayton's paper a lot. That's why I have them in this range. I have them number 21 overall, on the 6th line, and you're right. Their paper is fantastic.
I would also add that Dayton is a team that did at least try to schedule somewhat smartly, because they did beat Alabama. This was in the tip-off marathon, and also scheduled some pretty decent games at home against William and Mary. Also won at Vanderbilt, which they won, but they can't control the fact that the Commodores have literally slept through the SEC so far.
Right. Yeah. We have filled out the 5 line with Dayton and Butler. David, you've mentioned Kentucky. John, you've mentioned Louisville. But David, let me start with you. Give me 3 teams to go along with Kentucky on your 6th line.
Okay. Oh God, this is high, and I really. Oh my God, I don't like any of these teams. But my next 3 are Michigan, Notre Dame, and Seton Hall.
Michigan, Seton Hall, and Notre Dame. Okay, John, let me turn to you for that. You like Louisville, who hasn't gotten in yet. Who are your other 3 here?
This is where I would also add Kentucky, and I would also add Oregon and South Carolina.
Okay, well, you both agreed on Kentucky, so that's going to be an easy addition here. But beyond that, we've got a lot of dissension here. And David, let me start out with this Oregon mentioned here by John. I know you don't like the Ducks profile. I'd mention first that they are number 8 overall in the RPI right now.
Yes.
I'm sitting here with 7 top 50 wins, including 2 of them being away from home, Alabama and Utah. How can this not be a team that's at least a 6th seed, if not higher?
Well, because up until recently, Baylor had done nothing on the road. The win against Valpo was at home. That was okay. But again, Irvine at home. Stanford at home. Cal at home. Cal has 1 road win. I know that's a top 50 win, but you have to look at it a little more closely.
77-59 at Utah.
Yeah, I like that one. But, I mean, if you're looking at the 7... Like, of their 7 RPI top 50 wins, the majority of them came at home against teams that are pathetic on the road.
I think it's the altitude, Chad. Oregon can win games at 4,000 feet of elevation, but they just can't win above 5,000 feet, apparently.
Well, John, let me turn to you. You did not like Notre Dame, Seton Hall, or Michigan here. Why not?
Neither did I. But
well, yeah.
I like Notre Dame a little bit lower, but Seton Hall and Michigan have been a little bit schizophrenic over the course of the season to really put them this high yet. But I also like South Carolina and their overtime win at Ole Miss yesterday, so that's why I would have had them around the 6 right now.
Well, I'm taking one from column A, one from column B. Oregon and Notre Dame are both here on the 6th line. But the final 6th seed spot, David, would you want to respond to this South Carolina argument and tell John where South Carolina's big wins are?
They're in this imaginary happy place. South Carolina has a bloated record. I thought that the win that they picked up the other night was nice. They do have some. I think they have a lot of decent wins. Against NIT, but they don't have any great wins.
Their win against Clemson is actually starting to look a lot stronger when you look at all 4 ACC teams that have failed to win in Greenville.
Yeah, and they did do it in Greenville. I mean, there's some decent, but is it a 6-seed caliber win? It might be. I had South Carolina a little lower, but there's things I do like about them.
Let me throw out one other team for both of them. Neither one of you mentioned that I'm surprised hasn't been mentioned yet. And what about this Utah team? No losses outside the top 50, and they've got 4 top 50 wins, including Duke neutral, Texas Tech neutral, at Colorado. 4 more top 100 wins, including a neutral court win over Temple. Why are they not here yet?
They're on my next line. I don't think that Utah's outrageous. It's not like putting Oregon up here. But
we haven't mentioned Utah or Duke yet, so that's
I'm glad we haven't mentioned Duke yet because I don't think they belong in here yet. But John, what about Utah?
Utah, I would have actually had at the top of my 8 line right now.
Why so low?
Probably because many of their wins seem to be getting closer towards the bottom because they have the decent wins against San Diego State and Duke. But other than that, their really best wins would be Colorado, Oregon.
Not easy.
Other than that, you start to get to Temple, Texas Tech, Southern Utah, Idaho State, Fort Wayne, Savannah State, Delaware State.
Well, it seems like the two of you are leaning towards South Carolina here as more of a consensus pick than my Utah suggestion. So we're going to put the Gamecocks here.
Actually, I had the Gamecocks pretty low. I'm glad that after taking another look at them, I should have had them higher.
But let's talk about this next line here. David, I know you like Seton Hall and Michigan. Who would be your other 2 teams on the 7 line?
Utah, and after tonight, I realize you have to look at the entire body of work, but one of the things about Texas...
I agree with you here. Go for it.
It's Texas. They did not have anything major on the road. Holy crap, do they have something major on the road now. I have Michigan, Seton Hall, Texas, Utah.
John, let me turn to you here. I know you like Louisville. They still haven't gotten in. Who would your other 3 be?
This is where I would also add Seton Hall, and this is where I would also add Monmouth, and unfortunately, because it is part of the bracketing rules, I would have to add Duke right here.
Okay, so you said you had Utah 1 line lower than this. But you did both.
Chad, I did not realize. I'm sorry that this was the 7 line. Yeah. I was reading the wrong line. I have Missouri on this line.
Yeah,
we matched up with Kansas.
Okay, we're gonna veto that pick because they.
Why?
Yeah. Okay. Seton Hall, you both have agreed on at this point. David is leaning towards Utah, Michigan, and Texas. John, why wouldn't you have Texas as high? I know. I mean, this was a huge win tonight at West Virginia, a profile-making win.
Yeah, but at the same time, I try not to put too much stock into one win by itself, even though it was a nice quality win, because otherwise I would also have to add Georgetown in here if we go by that logic.
No, but Georgetown, though, you've got horrible losses to Radford and UNC Asheville. I mean, Texas, yes, they have the TCU loss, but other than that, that's their only blemish on their profile, really.
Well, depending on how things play out, would Texas Tech also be one of those losses that starts to stink a little bit?
Not at Texas Tech. I mean, Texas Tech is still a home court hero. I mean, my biggest thing was that there was nothing bad on Texas's profile. There just wasn't enough good on it away from home, and now I think there is. There's Yeah, I mean, there's some warts on it, but overall, it's a pretty healthy profile. The home win against North Carolina, which is starting to look a little better, and to win at West Virginia, it is not easy to win there.
Well, David, let me turn to you on this Louisville team. John's wanted them about 3 rows higher than this already, and we still haven't gotten them in.
I have them. Wow, I just don't. They're winning. I just don't see it. I don't see it on their paper, and really, I don't see it that much on the court. I was impressed with how they played in the games they lost against Michigan State and Kentucky, but now I'm starting to think that I was overvaluing those teams, and I'm less impressed by that. I mean, I have them in the field, but I have them in the 8-9 range. Or actually, no, I have them in the 8-9 range.
John, do you want to try to make a case if that Louisville still belongs in? Because I'm kind of agreeing with David still.
I'm still going to go with the eye test right here, but I still think that win over Pittsburgh is still going to have some weight, as would Wake Forest and, wait for it, the Grand Canyon Antelopes.
Okay, yes, the Lopeswood is huge, but the other two teams you mentioned we have not put in this field yet, and may not even get in the field depending on what happens the rest of the way here. But John,
Sales go with North Florida.
David, do you want to address Duke?
Let's see. I had them on my next line down, so I have them very close. And yes, I would like to address Duke. They have 2 home losses to teams that are seemingly below this in their last few games. Well, Notre Dame we've already put in. I don't, the loss to Syracuse, I wasn't impressed. When you're losing at home to teams that are bubble-ish, this is about where you belong.
John, one more team I'd like you to address is Michigan here. I've been convinced that Seton Hall, Utah, and Duke start the 7 line. I'm kind of torn from what you've argued. You've both argued between Michigan and Texas at this point. Where would you have Michigan, and why don't you have them this high?
I would have Michigan on the 8 line because really the only notable wins they have so far would be Maryland at home, even though they were shorthanded. They had a win against Texas down in Atlantis, and they also have the win at NC State in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. Other than that, their other 9 wins are against teams that are nowhere close to postseason.
Well, I've been convinced a little bit here. Michigan will be the last 7 seed in this field. Texas and Louisville will be the top 2 teams on the 8 line. John, you finally get your Cardinals in there.
I don't have. I still have Louisville lower.
John, let me start with you with 2 more teams to join Texas and Louisville here. I know you like Monmouth, so I guess it's just one more from you, really.
This is where I would add the Indiana Hoosiers after their 6-0 start in the Big Ten.
Powerful 6-0 start against 6 teams that will not be going anywhere. David.
That's what it is for me. I have Indiana in, but lower. Hold on, I got to make my. I got to keep up here. Utah and Duke are in.
Utah, Duke, Michigan. Seton Hall, Utah, Duke, and Michigan finished out the 7 line. I've started the 8 line already with Texas and Louisville because the arguments have been strong enough for both of them that they belong here.
There's a strong argument for. Well, I mean, if you think Louisville's profile is good in the teams that they've beaten, you're going to love my next team.
Okay, go ahead. Give me your next team.
Their paper is better than Louisville, and there's no denying that. The Crusaders of Valparaiso.
Okay,
I know that this is higher than where the real committee would have them. I know that this is higher than where a lot of other bracket forecast people would have them, but they are this good. They clearly are, in my opinion, one of the 30 best teams in the country. Well, in my opinion, they're one of the 30 best teams in the country. And when you look at their profile, like the win at Oregon State is not a tournament team, but they're a home court hero. Valpo went there and won. I can't really point to the win at Oakland quite like we could, but I like Valpo's team a lot. I think they're going to continue to blow through the Horizon League, and I think this is where they belong.
Okay, who would your next team be beyond Valpo?
Florida State.
Okay, so David, you're going Valpo, Florida State. John's going with another mid-major with Monmouth and Indiana.
I have Monmouth very close. Oh, Indiana.
Calling Indiana mid-major now?
Yes, is
Yes.
that who? Oh, I have Monmouth very close behind there. Monmouth's paper is very good.
Let me pause here because there's a team that neither one of you mentioned, amazingly, that I kind of think may be ahead of all four teams that you both have mentioned. What about the Buffaloes of Colorado?
They're next in line for me. Very, very close.
John?
I have them slightly below Valpo on my 9 line.
Yeah, because I go Valpo, Florida State, Monmouth, Colorado.
And you still wouldn't have Indiana until even lower than that.
Next line down,
Okay.
but further down the line.
I actually had 2 other 8-10 teams above those 2 on my 9 line, and that would be VCU and St. Joe's.
Given that you both have Colorado fairly close, I think that that's going to be our first team here. And I think it's either going to be Monmouth or Valpo for the other team. And John, I'd like to hear your argument why Monmouth belongs here over Valpo.
You have to look at the paper here if you want to do an apples-to-apples comparison. Valpo has the nice win at Oregon State, but it's not going to match neutral court wins against Notre Dame and USC, and let's not forget wins at UCLA and Georgetown that are still not easy to pull off.
In Iona, I mean, the only team that's won there.
David, Monmouth has been 2 teams that are already in this field above them. Valpo hasn't.
No, they haven't. And again, it's just one of those things. Monmouth's paper is better. I think Valpo's team is better.
Well, I'm going to go with the paper on this, and Monmouth Hawks are in on the 8 line and matched up in the first round with the 9 seed Valpo, because that is exactly what the committee would do.
Don't mix them up.
Well, it could happen. We don't know for certain yet. We'll have to have the bracket look down after the podcasts are done. You can see who the Monmouth actually did match up with. But the only team that's been mentioned, 2 teams that have been mentioned so far. We have 3 more spots on the 9 line. John, you like Indiana. David, you like Florida State. John, let me start with you here. Give me 3 more teams to join Indiana.
Yeah, I'd already offered this up as a teaser, so I'm going to add 2 teams from the Atlantic 10, and
Okay. Actually, it's 2 teams is what I'm looking for, not 3. I apologize.
Indiana, VCU, and St. Joe's.
Indiana, VCU, and St. Joe. So you're adding 2 A-10 teams, neither of which is named George Washington. David, give me 2 teams to join Florida State and Valpo on this line.
Well, I correctly have Oregon on this line, which is where they belong, but you've incorrectly placed them elsewhere. Let's see. I have Indiana as well, and I have Pittsburgh.
Okay. Well, Indiana is now a consensus pick here.
Wait, is Florida State in the field yet?
No, but I have them marked down for you.
Okay.
So your 2 remaining picks here will be Florida State and Pitt. John's going St. Joe's and VCU. David, let me have you address the St. Joe's and VCU as 9 seeds argument.
I have them an entire line below the 9 line. I actually agree with John that I like them both better than George Washington. I really like VCU's team right now. I think that at this moment they're playing better than anyone else in the A-10. I know that their paper isn't there yet. I think it will get there. I wouldn't be surprised to see them run through the conference with only 2 or 3 conference losses. But they just don't have it yet. I think they're playing well enough to get it as the year goes on, but when you look at the whole body of work, they still have work to do.
You guys know how great of a storyline it would be if you had St. Joe's on either the 9 line or the 8 line in the East region playing Villanova for the right to go to the Wells Fargo Center.
Was it 2 years ago we almost had that? Joe's lost in overtime to UConn, and they would have played Nova in the round of 32. That would have been spectacular.
Yeah,
anyway.
I'm not going to take a team based on a potential second round matchup here, John. So I do want to have a better argument than that. And quite honestly, I think I like both the Pitt and the Florida State profile better than Joe's and VCU. Not that I like either profile much at all, but I want to give you a chance to tell me why. What you don't like about Pitt and Florida State at this point.
I think the only edge I would give Pitt here would be their head-to-head win over St. Joe's, but they only have 5 wins against teams that really have a chance at postseason, and that would be Notre
John,
Dame.
how can you have made such a case for Louisville being so high and Pitt so low? That's what I needed the answer to.
Did you see what Pittsburgh did at home against NC State? What happened to the days when the Panther Lair was probably the toughest environment in the Big East Conference?
But how is Pitt's profile of it better than Louisville's?
Pittsburgh, they also.
I mean, how is Louisville and Pittsburgh?
I could name several ways it's better than Louisville's.
Yeah, exactly. And we already have Louisville as field. That's why Pitt's going in next. John, let me have you address Florida State though.
Florida State, I probably would have a little bit lower, around the 10 line. I mean, they do have wins against Virginia, at Florida, and but versus VCU down in Atlanta. But other than that, their only real notable win is at NC State.
You just told me that Pitt beat St. Joe's and Florida State beat VCU, and we're debating these 4 teams. So sorry, John, but Pitt and Florida State just won out. David, you're up next. I would just need your next 4 teams overall, actually, because I don't have anybody that you've mentioned yet.
I don't want to.
This is how we know we have a lawyer here running the show.
Do we have the option, and again, you as chair, of just maybe inviting 48 teams?
I would not object to that, but we do want to get the next 4 teams anyhow.
Okay, I have, and again, I'm going to have to argue hard for one of them because their paper is still awful. Actually, so is everybody's. I have Gonzaga, Wichita State, and I know, but you have to take into account that 3 of their losses, they were not at full strength. At full strength, they only have, is it 1 or 2 losses? But it's
2 losses, the Tulsa and the Seton Hall loss.
Yeah, both on the road. Seton Hall, good team. So I have Wichita State all the way up here. I don't like this team's paper at all, but I just like the way they play, and eventually they're going to get a notable win. I have Florida up here, and I have VCU, who we've talked about already.
All right. John, you liked VCU and St. Joe's here. Give me your next 2 teams.
I'll give you Wichita State as another consensus pick based on how well they're playing. And I'm also going to go ahead and give you the team of the American, the Connecticut Huskies.
Well, David, why not Connecticut here?
I got them close. They're on my next line down. I have Joe's very close to here as well. I don't know. And looking at it, a case could be made to put them up here. I just like Florida a little more.
Well, since you both kind of have them very close, we're going to go with UConn and St. Joe's to finish out this line, along with VCU and Wichita. Meaning, David, neither Gonzaga nor Florida got in quite yet. But John, why don't you give me your next 4 teams, because all your teams you've mentioned so far are in.
Okay, the next 4 teams I have would be Florida, Arkansas, Little Rock, Washington, and Gonzaga.
All right. Well, I think we may have a bit of some consensus going on here, at least with Gonzaga and Florida. David, give me 2 more to go with Gonzaga and Florida.
Okay. Try not to laugh. I just, the whole body of work, the neutral floor wins, the notable wins. I have Syracuse this high, and my next team is actually Arlington. I still like them more than Little Rock.
Okay. So you've got Syracuse, and I need you to make a case for Texas Arlington with 2 very ugly losses, and the best wins being Ohio State and Memphis, who are not going to be in this field.
Well, okay, they beat Ohio State and Memphis at Ohio State and Memphis. I think that those are rough places to win. They went into Texas, and I know they didn't win it, but they took them to overtime. I just think that again, that is the case I can make for them, is that although those aren't tournament teams, there's still teams that are tough to beat on the road.
John, do you want to laugh at him for the Arlington pick because they don't belong anywhere near this field right now?
Well, what's Little Rock?
Honestly, I would have Arlington as my very last team in, but I would also add the caveat that one team is going to knock the other team out when they have their first head-to-head matchup.
which is coming up this Saturday, in fact, yes.
I may have gone a little categorical here. Little Rock's RPI is in the 80s, isn't it? I mean, I looked at them. I like Little Rock, but not as much. I just think Arlington looks better.
Little Rock only has 2 losses, only one of which is bad. I can forgive 1 bad loss. I have trouble forgiving 2 bad losses with no notable wins, and that's my problem with Arlington that I don't
those
quite
are
have yet.
Notable. I mean, you know,
It's not against a tournament team. Little Rock may actually have a win against a tournament team because San Diego State may win the Mountain West, and that's a little bit better than beating Ohio State and Memphis.
Yeah, but they beat Ohio State and Memphis.
Tulsa wins the American.
They beat San Diego State and Tulsa. It's the same thing.
Yeah, but
I don't know that beating Memphis is much better than beating Tulsa. That's.
What team does Frank Haith coach? I rest my case.
All right. Well, we have Florida and Gonzaga in here. The teams that cases have been made for are Little Rock, Arlington, Washington, and Syracuse. John, do you want to respond to the Syracuse argument?
I would have Syracuse back in my first 4 here because they do have the win at Duke now, but let's not forget their wins earlier in Atlantis against UConn and A&M that propelled them to the title there, and that's when they still had Boeheim in charge. So once his suspension was moved up, it affected them mid-season, but I think the ironic part here is Boeheim was not originally scheduled to coach them at Duke, so moving that suspension up, while it did hurt the Orange in the short run, it may turn out to be a better thing for them as far as their overall body of work goes.
David, how about Washington? And let me kind of throw this out there. How about the Pac-12? Whether it be Washington, UCLA, Cal, Oregon State?
Yes, I have those teams. I mean, I looked at all those teams, and they are I don't know where my bubble stops exactly, but they are all right around the bubble, right around each other, and I have a hard time differentiating between them. Fortunately, they all play each other, and it'll all work out. But
after their last game, Oregon State tripped out of the bubble and into the
that's important. I'm putting that.
Syracuse and Little Rock are going to fill out our 11 line.
Okay. Syracuse.
Putting us down to only 5 at-large bids remaining. David, we know you like Arlington here, but why don't you give me? Let's start with our last team. Let's start with one team only here. Let's choose our last team that avoids the first 4, and then we'll go to the first 4.
Okay, my next team in line,
give me Arlington and one more. Give me one more beyond Arlington.
Oh yeah, I mean, but behind Arlington,
yeah.
I have Georgetown.
You actually have Georgetown in the field.
Yeah, and I think what it was is that I was looking for something that differentiated all these teams I was looking at, and they have the best road win by far. Like, nobody else on the bubble has a win close to that. I realize there's garbage on there, but that's why I took them, was because of what they did last night.
John, I know you like Washington. Give me one other team along with Washington.
Let me just double check and make sure I heard that right. You said Georgetown, not George Washington.
Yes, Georgetown.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of reeling from that statement as well. So.
Well, they won at Xavier.
I like the Georgetown win.
On the road.
I think it put them back on my radar, but I don't think it puts them in the field at this point.
This is where I would go with UCLA here.
Oh my God.
I kind of am leaning towards John's arguments, and
well, you don't take a home court hero.
And I'm going to go with his Washington pick actually here. I don't personally like it. I don't think I'd have Washington in the field, but it's close enough that David.
Washington did not win at Xavier.
Okay, David, we still have 4 more teams. The first 4. You've got Arlington and Georgetown as 2 of them. Give me 2 more.
I hate them because they have done nothing on the road, but I just can't get them. I have California and Alabama as the next 2.
Even with the loss to Auburn last night?
Yeah, even with that. Going down the list a little further, my next 2, I'm actually going to flip those. I'm going to go with Evansville and Clemson over California and Alabama.
Okay, so you don't have Alabama, California. You have Evansville and Clemson.
Yes.
Another team in Evansville with no notable wins. But a lot of wins, but no real true
Yeah.
notable ones. John, I know you like UCLA, so give me your next three beyond that.
Beyond UCLA, I would give you Clemson, George Washington, and Texas Arlington.
Wow. So Clemson and Arlington are both consensus picks and in the field.
All right.
I get a feeling one of these picks might be overruled here.
I would not have had either one in my field personally, but since they're consensus, Texas. The other teams that have been mentioned here are GW, UCLA, Evansville, and Georgetown. I thought that John's argument for UCLA was pretty good last time around when I went with Washington, so UCLA is going to take one of these spots.
They're home court heroes.
They've beaten Kentucky at home, and they beat...
but that's hard to do. So is LSU. Let's put them in.
Okay.
Winning Xavier is actually hard.
Really, it's down to three teams now between Evansville, Georgetown, and George Washington. And the one team that neither of you mentioned that I'd like to bring up here, what about the Stanford Cardinal?
I have them close. I have them right behind Evansville. They would have been my next team out, I guess, or for what next in line.
I have Stanford as my second team out behind Cincinnati. What I like about Stanford's profile is wins at home over Utah and California, and also Oregon State on the road.
Well, I mean, John, who's your first two or three teams out besides Stanford?
Okay, I already told you Cincinnati is going to be number one, but I would have Oregon State as my third team out.
Okay, and who would your fourth team out be?
Virginia Tech.
And Virginia Tech. David, you told me that after you made your change that Cal and Alabama will be your first two teams out. Who would be the next two after that?
Stanford and Arizona State.
Well, I tell you that I think Stanford's going to be our team in because they're the only team that either one of you have anywhere close to this list.
None of us have them in, so Chad puts them in.
I had them in my bracket.
I love how that works.
I had them on the 11 line.
Just so long as we have a consensus.
Exactly. We have a consensus.
Yeah, we have a consensus. Chad,
our top teams out, George Washington, Evansville. No particular order here, actually, even though there are numbers there. California. Georgetown was mentioned.
Yeah.
Cincinnati was mentioned. And Oregon State was mentioned. Also, Va-Tech was mentioned, but I completely overruled that one because they don't belong anywhere close to this field. On that note, that does actually complete our bracket here. Amazingly, one conference that did not get a team in is the Mountain West.
And if you're San Diego State would have been my team in, and I have them on the, let me see here, the three more lines.
The 15 line or three more spots?
No, three. No, I guess it would be the 15 line.
On the 15.
Of the teams that we did not take, I have about. No, it's not that far. I have about 6 or 7 ahead of them.
Okay. John, do you want to discuss the Mountain West at all?
We need to because this is the
Yeah,
they're not under the radar.
Not under the radar, but Boise State had at least a decent shot to move closer to at-large status had they been able to beat San Diego State, but since that fell through the wayside, San Diego State would be the consensus team out of the Mountain West now.
Well, how it's going to work during our next podcast, the Under the Radar podcast, we're going to go through the rest of the teams here. I've thrown San Diego State in there in the middle of the 13 line. I think that's where they're going to end up being, just so that everyone can see our one Mountain West team on the field. But that does complete the field. John, I want to start with you. Any final thoughts about the field that we came up with?
Not so much about the field, but there is one bubble update right here. Marquette went down at home to DePaul, which is going to be a pretty big eyesore for the Golden Eagles.
Yeah,
that's a huge loss for a Marquette team that had been, in my opinion, inching very close to. They would have been one of my top 4 teams out, even though we didn't really discuss them tonight. And just another score update here. This K-State Baylor game is coming right down to the wire as well. But David, any final thoughts on our field here?
Yeah, well, I mean, just what we talked about earlier. Oregon, we got them wrong. They're way too high. That's one of the most egregious things. And I guess, like, if you want to impress Chad, just schedule weak teams at home. But other than that, I don't know. That's all I got.
All right.
We
Well,
need a quintuple header.
a quintuple header. I think that we can turn off the screen share. Maybe I'll return here. Maybe I won't. Who knows? K-State and Baylor are going to overtime as we record this. Also, Michigan is up on Minnesota. A couple of score updates here. And Villanova not putting away Seton Hall yet in the second half. But
Where's
that
the
completes
Michigan?
our
Where's the Baylor game?
in Baylor.
No, I mean, where is it on television?
It's on ESPN News. But we're now discussing stuff that I'm sure none of you want to hear. So on that note, we are going to end the podcast. We will be back. If you look right down below us, you'll watch us on Under the Radar. Don't go any further than that, though. Don't look at the
Right.
bracket yet. We've got a little suspense still to go who the rest of the field's going to be. But for John Slika, David Griggs, have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you in about 10 minutes.